Today on The Real Story, a battle is brewing over SB 163, a bill that would ban employers from what's called captive audience meetings. Unions saying it's a tool used to intimidate and even fire employees who are looking to organize. This morning, Connecticut AFL-CIO President Ed Hawthorne will explain why he thinks it's time Connecticut gets it on the books. Plus, gas tax relief is on the way for all of us, according to the governor and lawmakers. The state's suspending its 25-cent per gallon tax on gasoline. But what kind of savings will you really see in your wallet? We're analyzing it this morning with two veteran journalists, Hearst Connecticut media columnist and associate editor Dan Haar, and the Connecticut Mirror's state budget reporter Keith Faniff. It's all today on The Real Story. Good morning, and thanks for joining us on The Real Story. I'm Jen Bernstein. Well, there is a bill being considered in the legislature that's pitting Connecticut businesses against Connecticut labor. It's Senate Bill 163, an act protecting employee freedom of speech and conscience. Its aim is to make what's called captive audience meetings illegal. Connecticut AFL-CIO's leaders describe them as mandatory closed-door meetings during work hours where workers are often threatened and harassed about joining a union. Now, the union says that employers are able to discipline and fire workers if they don't attend. Now, the bill has support from at least 35 lawmakers, from what I counted, including House Speaker Matt Ritter and Senate President Martin Looney, as well as Attorney General William Tong. But it is controversial. In fact, Connecticut businesses are saying that the bill is essentially an employer gag order that restricts employers' communications with its employees. We did have the Connecticut Business and Industry Association on The Real Story a couple of weeks ago. One of its leaders, Eric Getty, saying that the language in the bill is too broad, and he said that it preempts federal law. So Connecticut's AFL-CIO President Ed Hawthorne is disagreeing with that, and he's here to explain the union's support of SB 163. Welcome to The Real Story, Mr. Hawthorne.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so when we had Eric Getty on, a few of your members made it known on Twitter that they did not agree with what he was saying and wanted the chance to come on and explain. So let's start at the beginning here. Explain to viewers, and I just did a little bit, but elaborate on how these meetings take shape.
So the meetings take shape when an employer is trying to impress their views upon their employees by force. Like you said before, their captive audience meetings are mandatory closed-door meetings where workers are threatened and harassed. This bill before the General Assembly would allow workers to leave a meeting that is about politics or religion without fear of retaliation. So imagine for a minute that your employer holds a meeting to convince you to be a Protestant instead of Catholic, or Democrat instead of Republican. You must stay at that meeting and listen to their views without the opportunity to speak up or disagree. In fact, if you speak up or leave the meeting that has nothing to do with your job, you can be fired. And this often happens during a union organizing campaign where workers are frequently subjected to captive audience meetings about joining a union. Some examples of this: one nurse was forced into a hospital supply closet with the manager's back to the door and threatened to stop their support for a union. In a major hotel chain in Stamford, Connecticut, an immigrant female housekeeper whose first language was not English was alone in a hotel room simply doing her job when she was approached by three white men who immediately closed the door behind them and started raising their voice to her in an attempt to dissuade her support for the union that was attempting to organize in their workplace. And there's many more examples of this in the political context, and it's big money for consultants.
So federal law does protect a worker's right to unionize, or workers allows them to unionize, gives them the ability to do that. So what is federal law missing?
Federal law is missing the ability for workers not to be coerced and have to listen to speech that they fundamentally disagree with regarding politics or religion.
Okay, so, and you kind of just went over this. You gave some examples, which I was like, I want to hear what employers have done this. Do we know of employers in Connecticut who have used these tactics? You gave one example in Stamford, but is this something that's common in our state, in your opinion?
In every union organizing campaign, consultants are hired Well, almost every. I'd say 99.9% consultants are hired. I mentioned it's big business. It's estimated that employers spend approximately $327 million per year on union-busting consultants. Examples in Connecticut. Most recently, Glambia Nutritionals, that's located in Orange and West Haven, paid 2 consultants over $400,000 in 2 months to harass workers by posting disinformation, holding frequent captive audience meetings, and surveilling workers. Dollar General and Barks-Camstead last fall hired 5 union-busting consultants at a rate of $2,700 per day who held daily captive audience meetings. It is worker harassment, intimidation, and coercion, and it simply has to stop. We believe that an employee has the right, when they object to speech involving union organizing, politics, or religion, to respectfully get up, leave the meeting, and go back to their job.
We know that similar bills have come up in the past in the legislature here in Connecticut. They haven't made it through. So why are you confident this year that this one's going to go through?
We're confident this year because, you'd be hard-pressed to find another bill that has more union and a more diverse union membership that's for it and pushing for it. And we're really trying to talk to the legislators about what this bill really does and what this bill means. And we're trying to cut through all the disinformation that's out there. I mean, this bill does not prevent employers from talking to employees about any matters related to the work. It doesn't restrict their speech in any way. In fact, an employer can say the sky is purple if they want. It doesn't matter. The bill only prevents an employer from firing or disciplining an employee from leaving a meeting when an employer is attempting to force their views upon employees concerning, like I said, religion, politics, or union organizing.
Okay, so let's get into some of those criticisms that CBIA had brought up on our program a couple weeks ago. And, they're very critical of the wording in the bill. They say it's just simply too broad. I know you had just explained a little bit of why you feel like, or not why, but you just explained why this bill wouldn't prevent employers from being able to discuss some of those topics. But here's the statement on the purpose of the bill. It says to prohibit an employer from coercing any employee into attending or participating in a meeting sponsored by the employer concerning the employer's views on political or religious matters. And then you go through, obviously, the bill breaks down the term political and it breaks down the term religious matters. So CBIA is saying it's too broad.
We would disagree. We think that the bill is, it says what it says and it's clear on what it is. It doesn't prevent them from speaking. It prevents them from harassing their employees. There's nothing preventing them, for example, of inviting elected officials to a staff meeting to discuss current events, voter registration, anything like that. They can hold staff meetings to encourage them to participate in charitable events and activities. The only thing the bill does is it makes it voluntary. It gives a voice back to the worker when the employer is attempting to force their views upon them.
I don't want to go through like the nitty-gritty of reading the bill because that's not necessarily what viewers want me to do here. I have it right here. But when we actually look at the language here, for example, you have a meeting about masking in the office and COVID, or you have diversity training. Any of those could be looked at maybe as political. So where in this bill does it protect the employer from being able to, having that being an issue?
If a training is required by law, that is exempt from this. So if you have to provide a training on any subject by law, then this bill would not apply to that.
Okay, so let's talk about that bylaw. So I'm looking at one of the sections here where it does say, that they can still communicate with their employees. That's required by law. Information that the employer is required by law to communicate. And also another one here saying that it's exempt. I'm not reading this right. Nothing in this section shall prohibit, 1, an employer or its agent, representative, or designee from communicating to its employees any information that the employer is required by law to communicate, which is what you're saying. And there's another subsection that says an employer or its agent, representative, or designee from communicating to its employees any information that is necessary for employees to perform their job. So for example, though, masking wasn't necessarily required by law, I guess in Connecticut at points, but now, how would that even work?
That's a health and safety issue that I don't think would be under politics or religion. Me, it's quite clear.
What about diversity training? Because that might not be required by law.
Diversity training, I don't know if it would be considered political or religious, but as long as it's done in a respectful manner, I don't think that employees will get up and choose to leave the room. If it's true diversity training, there should be a dialogue. What we're trying to prevent is when employers try to force their views upon them and not allow a dialogue. For instance, we had a school bus driver down in eastern Connecticut that tried to speak up during one of these meetings and was told that she was not allowed to talk, and if she did so again, that she would be disciplined. That is what this bill is targeting.
Interesting. And I'm only bringing up those examples again because those are specific ones that CBIA has talked about, or when they were talking with the legislature and testifying. Okay, so where does this bill stand now? Obviously has a lot of support. Is it still in committee?
There are two separate bills. One came out of labor already, and then there's another one in judiciary that has been raised, and we expect them to vote upon. And we're confident that the bill does have a lot of support. You can see all the co-sponsors on the bill, and we believe it's important that this year's the year. I mean, if you look at the Great Resignation, as they call it, and the Pew Research study, worker resignation hit a 20-year high last November. The study showed that 57% of all of those that quit their job cited feeling disrespected at work as the reason. This bill is about respecting employees' beliefs and not allowing an employer's belief on politics, religion, or union organizing to be forced upon them. So we think, now is the time, out of the context of the Great Resignation and the pandemic, and workers really wanting a voice in the workplace.
No doubt employees in powerful positions as a result of the pandemic and demanding certain things like remote work, et cetera. Okay, we only have about a minute left, but I want to make sure we try to talk about hazard pay too, which is something else that you all are pushing. We have our frontline essential workers who were out there before vaccines, before even masks were really available to the general public, working in our state to keep us safe. You all are looking for pandemic pay, giving them a flat rate, I think, of $2,000. Is that correct?
$2,000 for full-time, $1,000 for part-time, yes.
Okay, and where does that stand at this point?
That's still, I believe, in committee, and we hope it'll be part of the budget. I mean, we're talking about all essential workers receiving pandemic hazard pay. Nurses, bus drivers, grocery store, retail workers, police officers, the people that kept society afloat during the height of the pandemic. Let's think back to March of 2020. Try to remember the fear we all felt. There was a deadly invisible enemy that we didn't know much about, and that was spreading fast. PPE was almost non-existent. In fact, we had nursing home workers wearing garbage bags as PPE. These workers were declared essential. They were ordered to go into work despite the risk, despite the fear, and like I said, kept society going while a lot of us were staying home and staying safe. Thousands became ill, many brought it back to their loved ones, and too many died. We're asking for what ultimately amounts to $1 per hour for a full-time employee. Through the ARPA funds, the federal government allows up to $13 per hour in pandemic hazard pay. Is it enough? Absolutely not. No amount will ever be enough to fully capture their sacrifice. But it is better than what we are offering them now, which is nothing other than a thank you. And that's just plain wrong.
All right, Mr. Ed Hawthorne, we really appreciate you coming on the program. Connecticut president of AFL-CIO in our state. You are always welcome to come here. Please keep us updated, and thanks for bearing with me as I went through this bill right here so we can talk about specifics out there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, you're welcome. We'll see you soon. Okay, Connecticut temporarily slashing one of two of its taxes on gasoline. The 25 cents a gallon state tax now suspended until the end of June. But how much of a difference will you feel at the pump? We're going to break it down with two veteran journalists who know their numbers. First, Connecticut media columnist and associate editor Dan Haar, and the Connecticut Mirror's state budget reporter Keith Phaneuf, when The Real Story returns.